Hello, bookkeeping friends, and welcome to our free webinar, Before the Cleanup, Uncovering Scope Busting Surprises. I'm so glad that you have joined me today. And as you are doing that, let me know in the chat where you're joining me from. I always love to find out where in the world you are located because we have people from all over the world. Do you know how you get into a cleanup and all of a sudden it's like it's way more than you thought it would be? So I'm going to share with you my system for scoping out clean. And last month, we talked about the 5 questions that you should be asking cleanup clients before you take them on. So I'm kind of going step by step here. So now it's scoping out the cleanup. My name is Veronica Wasek. I am the Unstoppable Introvert. I founded Fonby Academy several years ago with a desire to really empower bookkeepers to gain confidence and technical skills. I have recently shifted my focus, still helping you with that, but decided to really focus on diagnostics and clean as the way to help you gain confidence and grow as a professional and really take on more complex projects as well as develop diagnostic and problem solving skills. So you'll see that this is why I'm continuing to focus on diagnostics and cleanups. You'll see a lot of my content now focusing on that. I started and ran my own bookkeeping firm for 15 years, sold it a year and a half ago. I don't miss it. I will say I don't miss having employees and clients, but I do love all the education, all the content that I'm able to do for you guys. And I am a farm owner. But what I will talk about today is really defining what is a cleanup. I always like to define what a cleanup is so we're all on the same page. And I'll go into the 3-step method for scoping a cleanup: discover, diagnose, and define. So, what is a cleanup? And as I said, I like to define what I'm talking about so we're all on the same page. So, typically, when a client comes to you with messy books, and they're asking you to like reconcile. Have you heard that before? I need you to reconcile my books. I need you to balance the books. How many of you have heard that? Clean up the chart of accounts. We've heard that too. Maybe, hey, it'll just take a couple of hours. Let me know in the chat if you've heard that, that clients just think it's just, this leisurely stroll through the park. That is their cleanup. It shouldn't take long. And, it's just a beautiful sunny day, and we're just going to spend a couple of hours just kind of reconciling a little bit. But what you're really doing is getting down and dirty into their books and, totally covered in mud because cleanups tend to be a lot more complex, a lot more involved than clients really think. And that tends to lead to the client way underestimating what they think the cleanup will be versus what it really is. And that can lead to the disconnect between, even us approaching a cleanup and thinking that, well, it can't be that bad. The client said it's not that bad, but really it is. So that's what we're going to be talking about: strategies for scoping out cleanup so we get a full scope of work. So what is a cleanup? Cleanup is when we're taking messy and incomplete books. So the client has attempted to do some sort of bookkeeping on their own already, typically on could be another accounting software, but they've attempted to do something. And we're going to take those messy and incomplete books. We're going to review them, get them caught up. We're going to fix all the problems, and we're going to get everything reconciled. And the end result is really what we're now calling tax ready books. It's essentially books that are complete, they're accurate, they're tax ready, so essentially ready to pass on to that tax professional, and they're cleaned up at a transactional level. So we're not doing just little journal entries here and there to get things cleaned up. We're cleaning things up at a transactional level, which can be more time consuming, but definitely, at least in QuickBooks, that is how you have to clean up the books. Journal entries are not the best way to do cleanups generally in QuickBooks. And you control the process from the beginning when working with cleanup clients. But we have so many challenges with cleanup work. And let me know if any of these resonate with you. Let me know in the chat. we're not sure what's wrong with the client's books. They kind of tell you what they think is wrong, but we're not sure. There are a lot of surprises along the way as we're doing a cleanup. We're not sure how to price a cleanup even because we have no idea how long it'll take. That we have no idea what the effort is that we're going to have to put in. And we're not even sure when we'll be able to complete the work because we're not really sure what's wrong. So that leads us to issues of insecurity, low prices, employee mentality, essentially letting the client control things, bad clients. We get stuck in this cycle of like we keep taking bad clients because we're not really sure. And well, since I'm not really sure, let me just really price it really cheap because I'm not sure. And so then you just get stuck in this cycle and it's very hard to get out of that cycle. So let's go through the steps of scoping out a cleanup. So step one is to discover, and it's really your discovery process. We need to discover the situation that we're getting into. When we did last month's webinar, I really went deeper into the 5 questions that you should be asking your potential cleanup clients. So I'm not going to repeat that, but it's really about learning about the client, listening very intently, and then recommending. So that is the system that works: learn, listen, and recommend. And you do this during the discovery phase, that initial discovery call. Some of you call it a free consultation. I like to call it a discovery call. You learn, listen, and recommend. So, how do we do that? First, we need to learn about the client. As I said, the questions that we need to ask the client to learn about them, learn why do they need a cleanup, learn about their tax situation, even because a lot of their tax needs affect their bookkeeping. And as I said, I covered this extensively in last month's webinar, which is posted to my YouTube channel. So you can find it there. We're going to listen for the client's pain points. And typically they're going to tell you things like, my books are messed up. I tried to do my own books. I'm not sure if my books are right. I synced QuickBooks to fill in the blank as far as an app. And now my QuickBooks are messed up. My last accountant or bookkeeper messed up my books. The balance in QBO does not equal my bank balance. How many of you have heard that? Or maybe their employee has been doing the books and the client wants you to check them. Maybe the employee was doing the books and then embezzling from the client. It could be any number of things. So we're going to offer a paid diagnostic review to the client. And really the only way in which we can get a full scope of work is to look under the hood, just like a mechanic has to do a check before they decide how they're going to fix your car, how a doctor has to examine and diagnose you before they prescribe treatment. We have to do the same thing. We need to do a paid diagnostic review. So when the client is telling you all the pain points, all the things that are wrong with their bookkeeping, then what you need to say is, here is what I recommend. So that is how you're going to offer the paid diagnostic review to the client, is to say, here's what I recommend. Notice that it's very low pressure. We're not pushing people, making them feel like we're pushy salespeople. It's very natural. Here's what I recommend. And so here's what you're going to say, and make sure you get a screenshot, download the handout, however you're going to get this script, make sure that you have that. So what you're going to say to the client after you have learned about all their pay points and pretty much think they need a cleanup, you will say, I recommend doing a paid diagnostic review of your books so that I can get a clear picture of what's wrong with your books. At the end of my review, I will go over my findings with you. I'll also give you upfront pricing for my services, and the pricing for the paid diagnostic review is, and then you're going to give them the pricing. So you're probably then wondering, okay, how much do I charge for this diagnostic review? And many of my students have been intimidated to charge for diagnostic reviews. And so many of them have been surprised when the clients agreed that, oh, of course I'll pay that. So this is something, if you're not comfortable with, that you need to get used to just saying the pricing for the paid diagnostic review is. Okay, so how should you price the diagnostic review? These are some guidelines. Really, you can charge whatever you want, but charge something as you get comfortable charging for a diagnostic review, then you'll start charging more. So there's two options. I've used both options. Option one is pricing based on revenue. So let's say that up to $500,000, these are US dollars in revenue, you would charge 300 to 5 US, or 500,000 to $1 million in revenue, then 500 to 750, and then over $1 million in revenues, 950 plus. Option two is based on the number of months that you're reviewing. So, for example, up to 5 months, 500, up to 9 months, 700, up to 12 months, 900. Again, pick something that works for you, but definitely charge for a diagnostic review, because is your doctor charging you to examine you? Yes, right? Is your mechanic charging to do a 10-point engine checkup? Yes, they are. So we should be charging as well. And Iris says that she has been charging 795 and have a 99.9 close rate. Exactly. That was the same for me. Iris had a 99% close rate and was charging 795 plus. Right before I sold my business, I think I was charging around $1,000 for a diagnostic review. So step one was to basically talk to the prospective client, learn what their pain points are, and then to offer the diagnostic review. Step two, and really this will be the meat of what we're going to talk about, is the diagnosis. So diagnosing the books. Here's how we're going to get that full scope of work, or hopefully as full of a scope of work as we can get. The number one goal for doing the diagnostic review is to get a full scope of work before you clean up or catch up the books. So rather than jumping directly into a cleanup and really not knowing what needs to be done and essentially floundering because you're just not sure, maybe you don't even know what direction to go in, the diagnostic review is the tool and the system that will help you to get that full scope of work before you jump into the cleanup project. So let's talk about the paid diagnostic review and why it's the most effective way to get a full scope of work. So what is it? It's a paid project. It helps you to assess the health of the client's QBO data, or whatever accounting system you're using. You can diagnose problems and assess the level of cleanup needed. You identify transactions that need to be brought up to date, and you get a clear scope of work. So as I said, same as a doctor, when they're initially examining you and diagnosing, running tests, they're determining essentially their scope of work. So it's the same for us. Why is a diagnostic review valuable? We've talked about the fact that, yes, we can get a full scope of work, but there are additional points that you should be aware of. One is that you learn what the client is like to work with before diving into a deeper project. As I said, you get this full scope of work. It really places you in an advisory role, because now you're determining what's wrong with the bookkeeping, and then you're also recommending what needs to be done to get the books cleaned up and up to date. It puts you in control, which is really important, because now the client isn't trying to tell you that, oh, it's going to be a couple of hours, or it's, super simple. You're the one determining what needs to be done. And how many of you have come across those clients that tell you, well, I don't need you to clean up 2025. I just need you to clean up 2026. Or I only want you to clean up the profit and loss and not the balance sheet. Well, they're controlling you, and they're not qualified to tell you what you need to be doing to clean up their bookkeeping. Should you skip an entire year and not clean it up? It depends, but you don't want to just completely ignore it, because I guarantee you that those problems are going to come back and cause bigger problems. And another value of the diagnostic review is that it lowers the risk for the client. And the reason is because now they're engaging you for a smaller project at the beginning before they dive into a bigger and, in their mind, more expensive type of project. And why do we need to charge for the diagnostic review? We're qualifying the prospective client. We're making sure that they're willing and able to pay for our services, that they respect us as professionals. It demonstrates that you're a specialist. it compensates you for time invested in diagnosing the books. It really can take 5 to 8 hours to do a proper diagnostic review. And really, because you deserve to be compensated for your time and expertise. Why should we be giving away this work for free? And again, as I said, is your doctor giving away free exams? They're not. They never will. Is your dentist cleaning your teeth for free? No. And so we need to be of that same mindset. We deserve to be compensated because we're professionals. Now let's talk about performing the diagnostic review. We will need some information from the client. We'll need accountants' access to their QuickBooks or to their accounting software. We'll need to get copies of their business bank and credit card statements for the period that we're reviewing. And for S corporations, C corporations, and partnerships in the US, you will need a copy of their last tax return. So, in order to get a client started with a diagnostic review, we don't need a whole lot of things, but those are the three key things that you need. So for doing the diagnostic review, we're going to use a checklist. And this is a key for how do we keep from missing things is you have to have a system and a process, something, a repeatable system for reviewing your client's bookkeeping. And I use a checklist. I will show you the checklist. Here are the areas that you would include on that checklist: tax return reconciliation, review of bank accounts, unaudited funds, profit and loss accounts, balance sheet accounts, accounts receivable and accounts payable agings, a chart of accounts, the products and services list, payroll, inventory, sales taxes, and then anything that is specific to that client's business or industry. And as I said, I will do a quick demo of the checklist. So let me get that up and going. So this is my diagnostic review checklist. And you'll see that here towards the bottom, I have a worksheet or a tab for each of the areas that I mentioned that are on my checklist. So you'll see client information, the version of QuickBooks they're using, the users that are on their books, the tax return reconciliation, bank accounts, etc. And I'll show you some of these. So the first page here is the client information. So we're going to gather information about the client, such as the year that we're reviewing. So in this particular case, we're reviewing 2024 because they haven't done 2024 or 2025. They're behind. Their books are on an accrual basis. They're filing an 1120S tax return. They're on a cash basis and on a calendar year basis. And then we have information about their books version that they're using. Next is their users and the permissions. And I've come across so many clients that have all of these people on their QuickBooks that are not even users anymore, and especially accountants and bookkeepers that they're no longer working with. So one of the things that I would do is to take a look at their users and permissions just to make sure that the client was aware of who's a user on your QuickBooks. And also, who is the primary admin? Because many times the primary admin doesn't even work for them anymore. So these are things that are valuable to the client to point out to them. Okay, you may have users that are not even authorized anymore, or you may have a primary admin who doesn't work for you anymore. Next, we have the reconciliation to the tax return. And this is where for or S corporations, partnerships, and C corporations, where you would want to reconcile the bookkeeping to the Schedule L balance sheet on the tax return. So on my checklist, I typically then will have a question. In this particular case, it says, does a reconciliation between QuickBooks and the tax return need to be performed? And then we'll have findings, whether they're no, not applicable, or cleanup needed. So if I say cleanup needed, then you'll notice that the recommendation shows up here to perform a reconciliation of the QuickBooks Online balance sheet and the tax return. If I say not applicable, let's say that they don't have a Schedule L on their tax return, then and actually that probably should not say that, but no cleanup needed. Okay. So we'll put that back to No, we're okay. Next is bank accounts, reviewing bank accounts. Let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so we're going to list all of the bank and credit card accounts on the left. We're going to determine whether they're business or personal accounts and whether there's any commingling happening. And really, if we're going to talk about getting a full scope of work, one of the main things we need to understand is whether the client is commingling. And just as an aside, a tip for you guys, I've worked with clients that, they were using 15 bank and credit card accounts, and we had them make a list of all the accounts. Of course, we got all the statements for those accounts as well. And to tell us, okay, is this a business or personal account? And are you commingling? Essentially, okay, if it's a personal account, are there any business expenses running through that account? And I remember one client that it was literally like 15 or so accounts, and it was such a mishmash of how they were using those accounts. Business accounts being used for personal expenses, personal accounts being used for business expenses. And that when you understand the scope of work, even as it pertains to commingling, it can really inform the rest of the cleanup and the things that we will need from the client. Another tip is for clients to come. My team and I were not responsible for determining what was business and personal. We put that back on the client. Like, you're going to have to go through your statements. You're going to have to tell us what's business and what's personal, because it's not up to us to do that. All right. So commingling is one. And another, are the bank feeds connected in QuickBooks? Another here, are there any old transactions in the bank feeds? So let's say that, yes, we said cleanup is needed. We found old transactions in the bank feed. Then this also shows our recommendation to record and categorize all transactions in the QBO bank feeds. What about corrections? Let me go to that. So for this particular client, they didn't reconcile from September 30th through December 31. And so we realized that there are now reconciliations that we're going to have to do. And again, our recommendations. And then we reviewed for old uncleared items. So anything in the bank reconciliation that has not cleared for over 30 days, and noted number of transactions, the date for how far back these transactions go. And you would think 2020 is like a long time ago, but you'd be surprised. That's not what you will find with clients. The amount of uncleared transactions, and this is a big issue we come across. There's just duplicated transactions, invalid transactions, and recommendations. And then we'll also look for changes to the reconciliation opening balances, and then any discrepancies or auto adjustments. So as you can see, it's a very thorough checklist. And once you have a repeatable system, in that you're not having to remember off the top of your head, if you check for all these things, you go through the checklist to make sure that you covered it all, then your chances of identifying the items that you would have missed otherwise, your chances increase quite a bit. Let's go to undeposited funds and make that bigger. So undeposited funds, we'll review the section, I think they still call it that, and then QuickBooks payments. We find errors, we'll make a note of the number of transactions that we found were still uncleared in undeposited funds, the date, the amount, and make a note of our recommendations. And then another one, the profit and loss. And notice that we have questions for the income section, cost of goods sold, expenses. So it's very extensive. Other income, class tracking, change the cash basis, and check the balance sheet. So again, when you have a system in place, then you can be a lot more successful at scoping out your cleanups. All right, so I'm not going to show you the other things here, but as you can see, we have a balance sheet, AR, AP, chart of accounts, products and services, etc., as I mentioned before. All right, so that was the demonstration of the diagnostic review checklist. The third step is to define. And the goal here is to define the cleanup plan. So we have done the diagnostic review. We filled out the checklist. We made a note of all the things that we found wrong, the recommended cleanup. And so now we have to define the cleanup plan. One is for us internally to make sure we know exactly what needs to be done. And the other is to show it to the client. So when we are defining the cleanup plan, the goal is to make a document what you found, why it matters, and what needs to be cleaned up. And we're almost there really by doing the diagnostic review and working through the checklist. So how are we going to then document what we found in a way that will resonate with the client? And it's by giving the client a report of findings and recommendations. Okay, so dive right into that. Let me pull that up. Okay, so this is a sample report of findings and recommendations. And this is a sample company. I do these in Word. I know some of you AI people might be a lot more advanced, but I'm doing them in Word, but I'll show you how I do them in a way that goes pretty fast. So we have essentially a cover page here, and the report goes to the client in PDF format. It's a formal report, which they really appreciate. It's really the end result of what you have done, something that you can show them that adds value. So you have the cover page and then showing them why a diagnostic review is important. So there's just a write up there of that. And then we'll go into key financial areas assessed. And essentially, everything on the report coincides what we reviewed on the checklist and it's in the same order. So all I have to do after I have my report template is to copy and paste from the checklist onto the report of findings. So if you remember that we looked at the users and permissions. So what you're seeing here is just a screenshot from the report of findings and recommendation, rather from the diagnostic review checklist. So right here, you just get a screenshot of that. I use Snagit. So I just get my screenshot right there. And then I will just say copy. And then I go to the report and I paste it in the report. So I don't have to rewrite anything. It's all ready to go. And next is the reconciliation to the tax return. We didn't need any cleanup, so I just copy pasted the recommendation. But this is the one that I showed you that is longer, the bank and credit card accounts review. And as you recall, it was pretty long. So what I did is I just get screenshots of the different sections. So we started with commingling, bank feeds connected, and then I just kept going with the additional screenshots. And another thing, as I'm showing the report to the client, that, okay, so for example, statewide bank for bank statement reconciliation, they can see that, okay, we have a cleanup needed. They can see the date, they can see the recommendation. For this one, we have $38,000 in the reconciliation or changes to the reconciliation opening balance. So we're being very specific of the dates and the amounts and the number of transactions to, as I like to say, rub the salt in the wound for the client to really show them like, yeah, we found all these things. And the other thing that I do is that when I'm meeting with clients to show them the reported findings, I am showing them the report of findings, and then I go and show them in QuickBooks the exact same thing. So I don't just show them what I found, I will show it on QuickBooks so they can see it. And then undeposited funds account, same thing. We have just a screenshot from the checklist. So the report of findings continues on, and I filled some of it I didn't, but I'll get to the bottom page here. It's a long report. Okay, here we go. So at the last page of the report of findings and recommendations is the service recommendation. So based on all the things that I found for my cleanup client, then my next thing is the recommendation. So based on what I found, these are the services that I recommend so we can get your books cleaned up and up to date. So then I will list the services that I recommend, whether it's cleanup and catch up services, coaching and training, consulting, monthly bookkeeping services, whatever that is. I will then give them that recommendation, and then I will give them pricing for these services. So typically then I will say, like, these are the services that I recommend, and the pricing for these services is, and give them the pricing for whatever that is. So we have defined defined the cleanup plan for us internally and also for the client. And then we have recommended services to the client and have given them pricing for those services. So what happens, and I know you're wondering, what if you missed something? And you're asking yourself that, and it can happen. I mean, you can have a very thorough process for diagnosing your client's bookkeeping. And really, once you use that diagnostic review checklist, you're really going to see that you will find a lot more than you would have otherwise. But there's still, maybe a little bit that you didn't know about. So, what if you missed that? And this is where, as I said, there will be a lot less surprises when you have a system for diagnosing problems. But the key here is then I have to leave myself some wiggle room somehow. And so we have to factor those unknown surprises into our pricing because you never know. Okay. And so next month, I'll be doing a webinar on pricing clean because then I can spend a lot more time talking about that. Just keep in mind also, as far as the unknown surprises, there will likely always be some unknown surprises. And that's why it's important when you're pricing a cleanup to leave that wiggle room. And I will talk about my strategies for doing that next month on next month's webinar. So to recap, how do we begin to really uncover all the problems under the hood when we're taking on a cleanup client? Well, we have to do the discovery process, diagnose the problems, and then define the problem for yourself and for the client. And then understand that a diagnostic review is the best way to uncover scope busting surprises. I wanted to share some resources with you from my website. So if you take a look at my website, it's really the gateway to all my things. If you want to find some, like my YouTube channel, online academy, etc., just go to my website, Wasek.com, my YouTube channel, just Google Veronica Wasek or search Veronica Wasek on YouTube or go to my website, you'll find it. And then you can sign up to be notified about my latest content and webinars. Just wanted to share with you just a resource from 5MB Academy. Really, after way too many scope busting surprises, and I always like to remind you, I have been through whatever problems, mistakes you're going through, mistakes that you have made. I have been through the same problems. I have made the same mistakes. And I too had way too many cleanup clients that I did not scope properly. And I got tired of those scope busting surprises and underpricing my cleanups. So I created the QBO paid diagnostic review system. This course will give you a proven system for diagnosing a client's QBO so that you can quickly turn a prospect into a long-term client without doing all that work for free. This is an online course. It's video-based, so you can do it at your leisure. It has lifetime access, including future updates, and you can do it at your own pace. And you'll get the step-by-step system for how I do diagnostic reviews. It includes the diagnostic review checklist template, the report of findings and recommendations template, sample engagement letter, comprehensive QuickBooks Online diagnosis chart, and my proven sales process. And it also includes direct access to me in my private student group on Facebook, where you can ask questions while working on diagnostic reviews. And I'm just going to also give you the link there with the discount. And really my passion and my goal is to really change our accounting industry, bookkeeping industry, so that every professional, every bookkeeping, accounting, tax professional charges for a diagnostic review. That has become my mission. So thank you so much for joining me today. And I appreciate you being here, learning about how you can scope out your client's cleanup work before you dive in, and really understanding that a diagnostic review is the way to go. And I will see you next month when we will talk about pricing cleanup. Bye, everyone.